Good morning. Today's date is September 24th, 2009. My name is Tyrone Belanger. Today I will be conducting an oral history interview with Deacon Bill Moesley for the Veterans History Project in partnership with the Dalton Council on Aging. This interview is being held at the Dalton Community Television Studio in Dalton, Massachusetts. Good morning, Deacon Bill.
Good morning, Ty.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name, please?
It's William Gaylord Moesley, M-O-E-S-L-E-Y.
Where do you presently live?
At 25 Balance Rock Road in Lanesboro, Massachusetts.
What is your date of birth and where were you born?
My date of birth is June 2nd, 1923, and I was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Did you grow up and go to school here?
Yes, I did.
What was life like for you growing up during the Depression?
Well, it was tough. I know my dad worked in the General Electric Company, and he got laid off, and we didn't have any other means of income. And I can remember we had a few little independent neighborhood grocery stores that my mom and dad always traded at. So he was able to get credit at a couple of them, and I don't know how my mother did it, but we always had a meal. She could make a meal out of almost nothing, which I think a lot of ladies could do in those days because they didn't have any choice. And but we went without a lot of stuff. I know I needed a new pair of shoes very badly, and of course we didn't have the money for a new pair of shoes, and both of my shoes had holes in the soles. So what I used to do was I'd go to the grocery store and I'd get some cardboard boxes, and I'd trace the toe of my shoe, and then I'd cut it out a little bit smaller than that so it'd fit inside. So I'd do that and put them in, and then they'd be too tight and they'd make my feet sore. And if we had like a rainstorm or something, you know, my feet were soaked, the cardboard disintegrated, so I had to do it all over again. But, you know, I think that those were things that that probably helped us because it made us appreciate more what we had, you know. But we survived. We're none the worse for it. We were none the worse for it. We just had to change our way of living, that's all. Yeah.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister who was 2 years older than I am.
What did your dad do for a living?
He worked in the General Electric Company in the power transformer division. Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many years that he was?
He had, I think it was 42 years when he retired.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was he a veteran?
Yes, he was a veteran of World War I. He served in the Medical Corps. Yeah.
Did you graduate from high school?
I did. Yep.
What did you do after you finished high school before you went into the military?
Well, even before I was out of high school, I was working part-time in the A&P supermarket. And then after I graduated, I had a job at the what we called the Berkshire Button Factory in Pittsfield. We had to they brought in these big Brazil nuts, and we had to cut them slabs on a circular saw with a handle, and we had steel guards on our fingers because we were pushing it through the saw. And a lot of times we got cut pretty bad, and that was a pretty good job. And then I went to work in the General Electric Company in the for lightning arrestor department, and I worked there for, I don't know, a couple of years, I guess, and shortly after that I was drafted.
That was basically, you graduated from high school in 1941, I think?
41, yeah.
And then 43.
Yeah.
And you were drafted, as you mentioned.
Yes, I was.
And
yeah.
Where were you inducted into the service?
In Fort Devens, Massachusetts.
And what branch of the service was that?
The infantry.
Army?
Army infantry, yes. Yeah.
How old were you when you entered the service?
20 years old.
20?
Yeah.
What were your dates of service? Do you remember the dates of service?
Well, it was, I think, April of 43 till 46. I don't know the month I was
You mentioned
discharged.
April when we talked before, prior to April almost.
Yeah, April to April, yeah. Yeah.
And that was active service.
Right, all active.
Then
right.
you mentioned that you went into the reserves.
Yes, after I had a pretty good rank. I was what we called in those days a tech sergeant. Today it's sergeant first class in the Army. And of course they talked us into a lot of things. But the main point was that if I enlisted in the reserves and anything happened that I was called up to serve again, I would retain my rank. I wouldn't go in as a buck private. I'd go in as a tech sergeant. So that was the reason I did that. And I served 6 years in the reserves. Yeah, yeah.
But you were never really were activated
No,
again?
no. I was called up once, but I don't know, I had a problem. I was called up once for physical. And they had trouble finding any nerves or something in my feet, so they discharged me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Tell me where you were sent for basic training.
Camp Croft, South Carolina.
Can you describe some of the basic training experiences?
Well, yeah, the basic training in those days was 13 weeks, and then you were supposed to be ready for combat. But it didn't seem to me like it was enough. But we were trained in the use of the M1 rifle, the 30 caliber machine gun, mortar squads, and so on and so forth. All of the weapons, and we went out on hikes, 10-mile hike, 15-mile hike with a full field pack. And we had a lot of close order drill too, but you'd get out there and do push-ups, and they had an obstacle course where you had to go over fences and everything just to get you in shape for if you did get into combat, But it was a good experience. It was a very good experience.
Was it hard to adjust to the military?
Yeah, it was, because you just didn't do anything on your own. You had to ask permission practically to do anything you wanted to, and it was the point of taking orders. It seemed hard to, and in basic training, you have a platoon sergeant, and most of them were really tough. They were really strict. And so you had to take orders from them, and it seemed hard to just have to have somebody say to you, "You do this, you do that, you do something else," and you did it. And it was hard to get used to. Yeah, yeah.
But that was their job in basic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They had to toughen us up. We were kids coming in green, and they had to toughen us up and teach us what was what.
Yeah.
So they had to be strict.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
I remember, Sergeant Wendling. I think he was the toughest one that I ever had. He was a great big man. He was about, oh God, he must have been 6 feet 4 inches tall and probably weighed 235, 240. And I mean, he was all man and all soldier, strictly soldier. And but I learned a lot from him, and I was happy that I had him. Yeah.
You remember we talked earlier that your company commander.
Oh, yes. Good old Julius J. Julius J. Lucky, yes. He was a company commander, and he went overseas with us into combat. And I don't like to say it, but he was the most cowardly man I ever met for a captain, for a company commander, But he was, and he wasn't. I can remember just before we went overseas, we had a full field pack hike of 10 miles, and he was supposed to be leading us. He made about 2 miles of it. And then he got in the Jeep, and on the way back, we're coming into the camp, and he gets out of the Jeep and he calls everybody, "Look sharp now! The general will be watching us come in," and he's marching along, like he had hiked. And he'd only hiked about 2 miles. Yeah.
But he looked good for the general.
Oh, he looked good for the general. Yeah. Called us to attention, and he saluted the general, and
Can you describe how you felt the day of graduation from basic training, knowing that you had successfully finished?
I felt real good. I was kind of proud of myself that I had been able to do that, and I knew that we were going to get a furlough, you know, leave so we could go home before anything else happened to us. And I was glad it was over. It was tough. 13 weeks. You know, you realize they really had to push you to get you organized and trained in 13 weeks, because there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
Getting ready for combat. I'm sure you know that.
You mentioned you did get a furlough. Oh, I want to go back one because we had discussed earlier.
Okay.
You mentioned that you come out as sergeant out of boot camp or out of basic training.
Yes.
In which I think is, you know, that's quite an honor. I mean, that makes
Yeah,
sergeant.
yes, I was promoted to sergeant right away, coming out of boot camp, and they told me that when I came back from furlough, I would go to Camp Landing, Florida, and I would be an instructor there, training recruits for the 13-week cycle. Yeah. I was proud of that, because I was the only one in the company that got a promotion right away.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
You did mention that you got furlough. Now, how long was the furlough for?
I think it was 14 days. Yeah.
What was it like coming home on the furlough in your uniform?
Oh, it was great. It was great. You know, I was proud and cocky, and you know, I thought I was just about the best thing that happened to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. A little bit of conceit there, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think most fellas were proud of that uniform.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that after your furlough that you went down to Fort Blanding.
Yeah, Camp Landing, Florida. Yeah.
And besides the 13 months or 13 weeks of training, what did you train? What were your specific? What did you train the recruits in specifically?
Well, I specialized in 30 caliber machine gun, and because you have to learn how to aim those things and how to traverse and everything, and I also had taken a course in hand-to-hand combat fighting, which we call dirty fighting, because it could be dirty. And I instructed the recruits in that also, and I was real good at it. And I think I still remember some of the moves today. If I ever had to use them, I think I could really. But it was very good for most of them. And then we had bayonet training, which I instructed in bayonet training too, how to run a bayonet into a man and pull it back out. You know.
Well, hey,
and, the mortars. I didn't do anything with the mortars. That was a specialist for that. But that was about it. And of course, the M1 rifle.
Right.
We'd take them out on the shooting range, target shooting. You know. And
now, how long? Do you recall how long you were down at Fort Blanding?
I don't remember exactly, but I think I went through 4 or 5 13-week cycles, and it had gotten to the point where I just thought that I'd had enough of it, and so I volunteered for overseas duty.
Yeah, that was you mentioned about 7 months that you were down there.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah.
So now you volunteer for overseas duty. Where did you report to next?
Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yeah, that was our port of embarkation. Yeah.
Do you remember you weren't there very long? If I remember, you were talking to.
No, and it was funny because I got a 7-day furlough, and I went home and met my girlfriend, talked with my girlfriend, and spent some time with her and with my mom and dad. And I went back and I said, I knew that I had another one coming before we sailed. So I said to my girlfriend, I said, would you meet me in New York City at Grand Central Station? I'll take the train from New Jersey to Grand Central? And she said, oh, yeah, I would. So I went back to Fort Dix. When I got to the gate, there were MPs all over the place. We had been alerted to sail the next day. And we couldn't even use a telephone, of course, because secrecy, you know. The old saying, a slip of the lip can sink a ship, you know, in those days, yeah. And I learned afterward that my girlfriend and her mother went to Grand Central Station and sat there for I don't know how many hours. And she said every soldier that came through the door, she thought it was me, and I never got there. And I never could tell her. I never could let her know.
You never let her know, yeah.
No, no. They had us locked down. Yeah, yeah.
So now you're out. You're going overseas.
Yep.
And how long did it take you on board ship?
I think it was 10 days.
Yeah. Now, how were the living conditions on board ship? I heard that they were very tough. They're hard.
They were, you know, the bunk room, the bunk places way down in the bottom. It depended on what hold you were in, what level you were in, and I was in the very bottom, and the bunks were 3 high. It was all bunks on both sides,
Yeah.
and just an aisle, just about big enough so you could walk through it, you know. And they weren't the best sleeping quarters in the world, and the food was, yeah, half and half, I guess, you know. Sometimes it was pretty good, sometimes it was terrible. And we never sat down. They had these tables that were, this high. And we had to stand up and eat, you know. Every time the ship would hit a swell, you know, your things would start to slide off the table and you'd have to grab them. Good many dishes of food were on the floor. But other than that, I spent as much time on deck as I possibly could, because it was to get the fresh air. And so many guys were seasick, and I never had a seasick day in my life, because around my trip, because I was up on deck all the time. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I imagine, you know, you get up there as much as you can.
Oh yeah.
Because
and we had these sub chasers, what they called sub chasers. They were smaller boats, and you know, and they had this warning siren that they blow off, you know, if they thought there was a sub, and you'd see them darting all over the place, and sometimes you could see them drop depth charges. And so the minute you heard that, everybody was on deck in life jackets.
Because you weren't sure what was going on.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
Was it a large convoy?
Yes, I think there were 12 ships in the convoy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I heard of larger ones. I've heard of, you know, fellows going over with 2 ships.
Oh yeah, there were. Yeah, yeah. We had a large, and I never could remember the name of my ship that I was on, and every so often the name Bismarck comes to me, and I don't know if that was the name of the ship or not. It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a huge troop ship, huge.
Now you spent 10 days or so on the sea. Now you landed in France.
Mm-hmm.
Where?
Mm-hmm. Le Havre, France. Yeah.
And I think we talked about it before, January 21st, 1945.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
How was it when you landed?
Huh? We landed in a snowstorm. It was late at night. It was dark. I don't know exactly what time it was, but it was dark. And we landed in a snowstorm, and some of the natives told us afterwards that it was the first snowstorm they had had in 20 years in Le Havre, France. And I said, yeah, well, it would have to be when we landed. And then we were put on trucks and taken to a camp.
What was the name of the camp?
Camp Lucky Strike. And it was far from a lucky strike, I'll tell you. we got off the trucks, and the company commander called me, and he said, at that time, of course, I was a platoon sergeant, in charge of a platoon, and he called me in, and he said, he took me and said, your tent is right over there for your platoon. And there's 2 or 3 of them, and they were buried in snow. We had to shovel the snow off of the tents and then set them up. And those tents are huge. You figure a squad in a tent, or a couple of squads in a tent. They're pretty big tents.
20 men in? Or 20,
yeah.
25 men in?
Yeah, yeah. So, and it was so cold. Oh, God, it was cold. So we couldn't, nothing to build a fire in, you know. So we said, somebody suggested, look, why don't two men put we had folding cots, little canvas folding cots, that's all. And he said, why don't two guys put their cots together, and then instead of only having two blankets, you could have one on the bottom and three on top. Maybe we can keep warm. And it worked out great. It worked out great. And of course, we couldn't leave the camp, but three guys and I decided one night we were going to find out how to get out of the camp. So we got out, and there was a little town, maybe 2 miles from the camp, and there was a French bakery there, and they didn't have a lot of bread, but we brought some bread back to the tent, and on the way back we passed a little farmhouse, and there was an old milk can sitting in the yard. So we brought the milk can back to the tent, went out and picked up some scrap wood and stuff, and we at night we'd build a fire in the milk can. Well, of course, it would smoke, you know, and there was no way to have a chimney or anything.
Well, I was just going to say, you didn't have any.
Oh, you'd get up in the morning and you'd spit black for about 10 minutes, you know, but it kept us warm. But and we were marching around, you know, we were still trained. We didn't just sit in the tents. We had things to do, training to do, and we had that snow. So the company commander said, I'm going to order some boots for our company from headquarters. Well, the boots never did come in till springtime, so we never did get them. But and it was terrible eating in Camp Lucky Strike. You know, we had these, I don't know if you would know what they are, but they're mess kits, they call them.
Yeah.
And they're aluminum pans with a cover on them and an aluminum cup. And you'd go through the line, you'd stand in the line for 10, 15 minutes going through, and then there was no place to sit. You'd have to eat standing up. And by the time you got someplace where you could stand and eat, the food was cold, the coffee was cold. It was a mess. It wasn't, the conditions weren't what you'd call ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when you went over there, you went over with, if I'm not mistaken, the 65th Infantry Division?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I just want to mention that, you know, your units while you were there.
Yeah. We were assigned to the 65th Division when we went overseas, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't too long after you were at Camp Lucky that you met General Patton. Is this when you were getting ready to move out?
Well, he called a meeting of all the commissioned officers, which of course is from a second lieutenant up to a general, and non-commissioned officers, which corporal up. And we got into, it was about 11 o'clock at night, and he was in this old barn, and they had set up a stage for him, and we went in there, and he got up on the stage, and his first words out of his mouth were, "Who the hell ever heard of the 65th Division?" You know, well, they're going to hear about it because now you're going to be joined with the 9th Division, and I'm going to make sure they know who's fighting. And that was it. He said, and he did a lot of other talk, you know, but then his final words were, "We're moving out to combat in the morning, be ready."
That was it.
That was it. That was it.
Now, the 65th and the 9th Infantry Division were part of the 3rd Army.
Yeah.
Okay.
General Patton's 3rd Army. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that night, I guess, you were
Oh, yeah, the
move
next
out?
morning, they got us up at I think it was, I don't know, 3 or 4 o'clock, and we were moving out, and there were 2 little towns. We called them twin towns, Saarlautern and Saarbrücken. They were in the Saar Valley and part of the Siegfried Line. And the Germans had recaptured them as part of the Battle of the Bulge. And it was our job to free those 2 towns. So we were supposed to attack it at daylight, attack the 2 towns at daylight. So they put us in these trucks in a convoy, and of course, all we could use was blackout lights on the vehicles, and it was a slit of light about that long and about that wide, you know, and you could just about see it,
Yeah.
So there were, my platoon was in 3 different trucks. And I don't know what happened. The first truck of our platoon, either he missed a turn or he fell asleep or something. But anyway, his truck went off into about a 30-foot drop, slope, tipped over, and the second truck, of course, followed him, and he went over the banking and landed right on top of the first truck. And luckily, my driver saw what was happening or realized that the truck had disappeared, and he stopped, and I lost half of my platoon. Some of them were killed, some of them were seriously injured, and but we had to keep going. We left some people around there from, of course, there was a company. It wasn't just my platoon. There was a company, but it was my platoon that got hit the worst, and so we had to leave some people behind to straighten things out and take care of the wounded and stuff, or the injured, not wounded. And we went on to the 2 towns. So
you didn't have too much of a platoon left.
I lost 21 men.
And then you had to leave some behind?
Yeah. So we went into the 2 towns, I think, with 18 men, something like that. But of course, you know, it's a company. It wasn't just my platoon. But my platoon had certain things to do, and we were by no means at full strength. But we managed. We managed. I had a great platoon. I had great people, great soldiers under me.
Now, how long did it take you to take that? I think we talked about it earlier.
I think it was a week, wasn't it?
Of fighting in that.
Yeah. Because of course, you know, when you go in to take a town like that, you not only have to drive the Germans out, but you have to search every building, because there could be snipers in these buildings, or there could be other German soldiers hiding in these buildings, and they could shoot you in the back or anything, you know. So you had to clear every single building in the towns.
So it was a real tedious job. I mean, a lot of them you probably weren't full combat all the time, but it was the idea that anything could happen at any moment.
Right. We didn't fight, really be in a battle for the week, but all in all, it took about a week to clear the 2 towns. Once you get them on the run, like I say, you have to clear all those buildings.
So then, you're done with this town. Now you're moving north, if I'm not mistaken. That was the direction you're moving through.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a lot of small battles.
Well, yeah, you know, what we would do was you'd go along, and like we cleared those 2 towns, then we'd clear the town. If we came to a town, we'd clear it, and all the time we were pushing the Germans back, and you'd clear one town and then go on to the next town and blah, so on and so forth. And as you go along, some of the towns the Germans had already left, and others they'd put up a real battle. So you never knew what to expect. And of course, 9 times out of 10 we were walking. We were infantry, the foot soldier. And there were some times when Patton would have some of his tanks around, he'd let us ride on tanks, but not very often. But and that's the way it went. We did that from Saarbrücken and Saarlautern to Enns, Austria, one town after the other.
So how were the conditions as to your food and your living conditions when you move into a town? Did you have any type of heat or?
Well, if we stayed in, like for instance, if we were going to stay in that town to get a little rest, we'd just take over houses, and of course we'd have these K rations, you know, and if you want to call it food, but it sufficed, you know. It was I enjoyed them. You had cans of spaghetti and meatballs and beans, French and beans and stuff like that, and then they give you a candy bar or a cookie and a package with 3 cigarettes in it, you know, and that was all in one little package.
Yeah.
And then they had C rations, which everything was canned in C rations, but that was later on. That was later. If there was any chance that the mess, the kitchen, could come up, then we might get one hot meal.
The field mess. I think
Field
they
mess,
call it,
yeah.
So now you're fighting these all the way through, and you get up now. It's to Enns, Austria. Is this basically where it ended for you?
Yeah. And we met the Russians there. Here they were on one side of the Enns River, and we were on the other.
How were they? I think you mentioned it.
They were barbarians. They came across the bridge into Enns, and with their tanks, and they'd run down street lights, they'd run down houses. Nothing, anything got in their way, goodbye. Yeah.
Now, how long were you in Enns, Austria?
Oh, gee, I don't know. See, when we were in Enns, Austria, the war had ended and we became part of the Army of Occupation. But I'd like to tell you about that one town that we took, that we had cleared. It was, I'm pretty sure the name of it was Aachen, A-A-C-H-E-N. And we had, our battalion had cleared the town, and most of the men were billeted in the town, in houses in the town, but our company was outside the town, and my platoon, and we were in a little farmhouse, and we got roused from sleep about, I had posted my guards in my outpost, and one of them came running in and woke me up, and the Germans had counterattacked the town. And so he said, we're moving out right away. So we went to the town. It was maybe wasn't very far. And the minute you got close to the town, you started stepping over dead bodies. And some were German, but most of them were our American boys. And what happened was the mayor of the town was a real Nazi, and he had sent word to the Germans, who were not too far from the town, and said that he would tell them every house that the American soldiers were in. And he did. And
so the Germans knew where all the Americans were and what buildings too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was yeah, and I mean literally you stepped over bodies. There's no sense in buttering it up, because it was a disaster. And we had managed to drive some of these Germans out into a field outside, just a little ways outside the town, and but they wouldn't give up. I tell you, the Germans, Hitler had inducted in, he had convinced these German soldiers that they were invincible, that they were supermen. And so they kept shooting at us. So I called for a mortar squad and a machine gun squad. And I had the machine gun squad start firing to pin the Germans down. And then I told the mortar squad to lob some mortars over into them. And I don't think anybody escaped. Mm. And it was, the first mortar round that went off, I said, this is for all my dead buddies in this town. And, sometimes I think of it today and I say, how the heck could I have done that? But when you're in combat like that, you have to realize that it's either you or them. And I had made up my mind very early in combat that it wasn't going to be me. And because, of course, you never know what bullet has your name on it. You never know.
I want to go back. I think just before that battle, we had talked about a patrol that you had gone on.
Oh, yeah.
With Captain Fleck or Lieutenant Fleck?
Lieutenant Fleckenstein.
Fleckenstein, or you called him Fleck, I guess?
It was when my platoon, I still didn't have, we just weren't up to full strength yet, and I don't know. It seems to me like the battalion commander was always picking on my platoon, you know, do this, do that, you do this. And I know that we had gained the reputation as real fighting men, and my men would follow me anywhere. I never asked my men to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, never. And 9 times out of 10, if it was something to do, I would be the first to do it. And we had taken this little town, and we were getting ready to move up to the next town. So the battalion commander thought maybe we should send out a patrol and kind of scout out the town to see how well fortified it was. So we got up, we were, I don't know, we left very early in the morning so that we'd be there by daybreak. And we were going down this road, and I had my men spread out. I never let my men bunch up because one burst from a machine gun or a mortar could kill too many. So Lieutenant Fleckenstein was leading it, and I was bringing up the rear. And the column stopped, and word came back that Lieutenant Fleckenstein wanted to see me up front. So I went up front, and I was standing behind him, closer than you and I are. And all of a sudden, 2 machine guns opened up, one from on each side of the road. So we were caught in a deadly crossfire, and so we dove for cover on the side of the road. And I called for Lieutenant Fleckenstein, and there was no answer, so I kind of had a premonition that something had happened to him. So I sent 3 men from my side of the road, and through hand signals that we had arranged previously, I sent 3 men from the other side of the road to see if they could knock out the machine guns. And with hand grenades, they were able to knock them out. And so then I looked for Fleck, and that was his code name. My code name was Mo, and he was laying right where we were standing. He'd been hit by 4 bullets, died instantly. And I'm, like I say, I was standing closer than I am to you, and I didn't get a scratch.
It was a matter of a couple of feet?
Yeah.
Wow. And
I didn't get a scratch. And so one of the men got his hand shot up pretty bad. One of the guys that went to knock out the machine gun nest. And luckily I had a medic with me. And so he took care of him. And he had lost a lot of blood, and he couldn't walk very good, so we cut down 2 sapling trees, and we took, I think, 3 or 4 field jackets and made a stretcher out of it. And then we took turns carrying them, and we started back to where our company was supposed to be. But when we got there, the company wasn't there. And they told us that they had gone down further the road, 5 miles down the road. So here we go again. We've been hiking since 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you know. And I was furious. Oh man, I was so mad.
I heard you had a German temper?
Oh yeah, a little bit of a German temper. Well, I was about 6'2", and I weighed 215 or 210, 215, and I didn't care who you were in those days, you know. Yeah. And when we finally caught up with the company, I went right up one side of Captain Lucky and down the other, because I was furious, you know. And I said, do you realize we've been walking since 3 o'clock this morning, and you don't even look for us, or you don't even care where we are, or if we're dead or alive or what? So when he heard about Lieutenant Fleckenstein, he felt kind of bad. So, but anyway, I laid it into him good, and he said, Mo, I could have you court-martialed. And I said, go ahead. And then I'll get the hell away from you in this stinking war. But he never did, and I walked away from him. But it was sad because Lieutenant Fleckenstein was a great platoon leader, and I never did get another platoon leader right up to the end of the war.
So you were basically platoon leader the rest of the war?
Yeah.
Now, what happened to this Captain Lucky? You mentioned a little incident.
We were in a little battle in a little town, and there wasn't really a battle, hardly any resistance at all. And the next thing we know, he's laying on the ground, moaning. And he had been shot in the foot. Now, he swears it was from enemy fire, but how you get shot down from the top of your foot from enemy fire, I don't know. But we never could prove it, but we all swore that he shot himself in the foot to get out of there, and he did. But like I say, no, I don't say it again. I said it once, that's enough.
Now you were just, I guess, after these small battles and all, you got up to Enns.
Enns, Austria.
Now,
yeah.
You mentioned something about a concentration camp, I think.
Yeah, well, on the way, we liberated the concentration camp at Dachau, and I mean that was something that I won't never forget either. It was almost as bad as our dead bodies in Aachen. You know, and another thing I want to tell you about Aachen. You've heard the expression, probably, sometime or other, the streets ran with blood. Mm. Well, the streets of Aachen ran with blood. And unfortunately, the majority of it was our men, you know, and it's strange for me to be talking about it because I have never talked about my combat experiences, because, not even to my own family, because some of the memories like Lieutenant Fleckenstein and Aachen are just, you know, too hard to take sometimes, you know. And, but I'm glad that I'm doing this. I'm happy to do this.
You're doing very well at telling your story. I appreciate it. At Dachau, or however, Dachau, who ran the camp? Who was it?
Well, it was run by these German officers, all officers. They called themselves, they were called SS troops, German SS troops, and they were supposed to be the superlative troops of the whole German army. They were supposed to be the best trained, the best fighters and everything else. And of course they had some soldiers with them to patrol the place and everything, but it was a real pitiful sight. It was.
You had mentioned earlier too that when the German officers were asked to dig graves and so on and so forth, they didn't like the idea?
No, they weren't too happy about that, but we decided that, the battalion commander for one, and everybody agreed with him, because there were bodies stacked up in that camp, and I guess they were stacked up ready to be burnt, because that's what they did. They burnt most of those bodies. And and there was a big long concrete wall that was all pocked from bullets, you know, where they lined them up and shot them. The ones that they didn't gas, they shot. And so we made everybody that was there, all of the Germans that were there, including the highest rank officers and everybody else, we made them dig the graves. And some of the guys, when they finished digging them, they said, why don't we shoot them and let them fall into their own grave, you know. But the battalion commander wouldn't have any of that, and I was glad, because I didn't think that would have been the proper thing to do. But, you know, combat can really make you do and think things that you never would dream of.
Oh, yeah.
Because it can really get to you.
Now, I can imagine really after what you people saw.
It can really get to you, yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you got to Enns, the war is basically over. Mm-hmm. You were considered occupation
Army
force.
Occupation. Yeah.
Now, you were there for quite a while.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and we had there were some nice. There was a hotel and the big old castle, and we were billeted in the hotel and the castle, and they had it was strange, you know. This town, I don't know why, but didn't have any sign of war at all. There was no destruction in it at all. Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And they had this nightclub that we discovered, and just as a little side note, you know, add to a little humor to our sadness and stuff. And so these two men and I decided we'd go to the nightclub one night and have a few beers. So, and there were Germans up there. They were dancing, you know, and so on and so forth. And so when we were going out to go back to our hotel, we passed this room with the door partially open. And so we looked in, and it was where they kept their barrels of beer. So we got the brilliant idea that maybe we ought to take a barrel of beer back to the hotel with us, you know. So you can't carry it, so we're rolling it down the street. You know, we're rolling the barrel of beer down right through the square. And who the heck shows up but two MPs? What the heck are you guys doing? So we want to take this barrel back to the hotel. To make a long story short, we were severely disciplined. They reported us to the company commander, and we were severely disciplined. We never did get the beer.
There's a couple of other things that you mentioned while you were there. Oh, yeah, when you were R&R, and you found some what you call white lightning.
Well, we had they decided that they should have somebody patrolling the shores of the Enns River outside of town to pick up any stray German soldiers that were around. So my platoon again. But they did us a big favor because we were about 3 miles outside of town in a farmhouse. And we would have to patrol the bank of the river every so often. And I was out with a squad one day patrolling the river, and we decided we'd go a little further down the river to make sure everything was all right. And we came across this old wooden building. And the building was old, but the doors were fairly new, and they were locked. They had a padlock on them. So I said to the guys, I said, I wonder what's in that building that they got it padlocked. So one of my guys said, well, let's find out. So he used the butt of his rifle and smashed the lock. And we opened the door, and there were, I don't know, a few barrels, small barrels. And they all had spigots in them, you know. So we didn't know what they were. So this one guy said, let's try them. So he turned the spigot on, put a little bit on his finger and tasted. So he said, that's German whiskey. So, well, we're going to take a barrel of that back to the farmhouse, you know. And we did. And I mean, you talk about potent stuff, man. And we named it White Lightning. It was just as pure, just as white as water, color of water. We called it White Lightning. And I was never much of a drinker, but I can remember one night we got to drinking some of that White Lightning, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in the middle of the kitchen table singing to my men. They were all sitting around and listening to me sing to them. You know, and there were some good times. And what they did was they sent, and we had it made because they sent a cook, stove, all kinds of things. Because we couldn't walk up to the town for every meal. So, and this farmer had a whole bunch of chickens. So one Saturday we decided Sunday we're going to have a chicken dinner. So I don't know how many chickens we killed, Mike. It was pitiful. We killed, I don't know, 15 or 20 chickens, I guess. So we had our meal Sunday, and Monday morning when we got up, there wasn't a chicken on the farm. The farmer had scattered all his chickens over to another farm, so we couldn't have any more. But, you know, it's one of the things.
The lighter side of what you had to do.
Yeah, you can remember some of the good times, too.
Sure.
It wasn't all bad, but we needed good times like that. Yeah.
Now, while you were at Enns, or while you were there, you were given a duty regarding the POW camp, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it wasn't in Enns. We were on our way back. I think it seems to me that we were moving back toward Le Havre, France, because see, most of us at that time had enough points to be rotated home.
Okay.
They went by points. So many years of service, so much time in combat, so many battles and stuff like that. They went by points, and we came to this town of Moosburg, Germany, and the battalion commander called me in and said, Sergeant Moesley, I'm going to put you in charge of the POW camp here. And I said, really? Yeah, I am. So he put me in charge of this POW camp, and I don't know, there were hundreds of German POWs there, and I had to inspect the camp 3 times a day, and it would take maybe an hour and a half to inspect the whole camp. And part of the camp was solitary confinement. They were cells with steel doors and just a slit where you could pass food into them and check. And I'd have to check that every 2 hours. And because these were political war crimes prisoners, and they were the ones that were going to Nuremberg to the war crime trials. And when it was their turn to come, I had to send 2 men with them, and except one at a time, of course, and they'd had to be handcuffed and shackled to go. And so that was, I had to do that and there was, but you know, you have to sometimes admire the German soldiers. I know they were brainwashed, but I had a Jeep and a driver, but I always walked because you can't see everything riding in a Jeep. So I would always walk through the camp. And they had fenced-in yards that the prisoners could walk in and exercise in. And when I walked down that path, all you could hear was Achtung, 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 and you'd hear heels click. And they'd snap to attention, and they'd stand at attention until I got by them. Respect for authority, you know. And of course, and that's the way they were trained. But no matter how many times a day I walked down that path, that's all you'd hear. Achtung, Achtung, which means attention.
Yeah. Wow.
German for attention. You know, and they'd snap to attention, click their heels, and stand rigid until I went by them. Yeah. Huh. And I had my own office. I had my own bedroom. I had a private cook.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that.
I had it made. I was hoping that I'd stay there for a while because the duty wasn't that bad, you know, and I really had it made. Yeah, yeah.
Now, how long were you there? You know, at the camp.
Oh, gee, I don't know. I was there for quite a while. I couldn't tell you exactly the exact time, but I was there for quite a while, and I enjoyed it because. I had it made. I had everything my own way. I had all kinds of good food, and I had a tailor. He took my sleeping bag and made a jacket out of it for me, and I had a Jeep and a driver, and you know, I couldn't ask for anything more at that particular time, of course.
Yeah. But all that came to an end. Now they're telling you, now they're sending you home. You were going back to the.
Yeah, Le Havre.
You went back to Le Havre.
We went back to Le Havre.
To your favorite camp.
My favorite camp, yeah.
Camp Lucky Strike?
Yeah. But they had changed. They had put barracks up, you know, and of course it had been quite a while.
Well, I was just going to say, it was, got about 16 months?
Yeah.
About that you were gone?
Yeah, yeah. About that, yeah, yeah.
So now you're getting ready to come back. You mentioned you were, what was the name of the ship? I forget.
SS Hood Victory.
That was it, okay. Now there were 2 ships that were coming back at that particular time.
And I can't remember the name of the other one. Yeah. Yeah, and the captains made a bet who would get to New York first. And they were having, the USS Hood Victory was having boiler trouble. So they had to put a new boiler in it, and the other ship left a day ahead of us. But that captain of SS Hood Victory, I don't know where he got the power, but man, that thing flew over that ocean. You wouldn't believe it. And they were small ships. And I mean, a rough sea, you could really get sick.
Tossed around.
But then again, I was on deck as much as I could, and I was never seasick. And it was. I think we beat them. We beat them, I know, but I can't remember by how much. Maybe a few hours or something like that, you know. But we did beat them.
I don't know if we talked about this earlier. Were the conditions better coming back on the ship? You said it was a smaller ship.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, yeah. They had mess halls where you could sit down and enjoy your meal on those ships. But you know, of course, there weren't that many troops on them as there were on the troop ship going over. You know.
Well, I was going to say, so they didn't have to cook for as many. You know. I mean. No,
right. Yeah. And we had a I think I told you this. The other platoon sergeant and I got into the whiskey business. We found out a place where we could buy whiskey, and so I confiscated a Jeep, and we'd make a nighttime run and load the Jeep up with bottles of whiskey and come back and sell them. You know, and we made a fortune. My God, I had money coming out of my ears. But when we got back to the Lucky Strike, they would only let us bring so much money back to the States.
Really?
A certain amount. That's all. Yeah. So I was gawking around giving people money. You know, there's nothing else to do with it. I didn't want to throw it away, so I just gave it to guys that needed it to get the limit. You know, but that's another little side note that I think is good. Yeah.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I didn't realize you were in the black market.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Yeah. The Army occupation wasn't bad. We had some good times.
Yeah.
But it seemed good after what we had been through, you know. Yeah.
So now you're back to the United States, and you're discharged almost right away, right?
Yeah, I think within a week. Yeah. But I want to tell you, you know, I wrote that.
The memoirs?
Yeah. Like I said, I never talked much about my experience, but my son-in-law, whom I love dearly, is the best son-in-law you could have. He said to me one day, Bill, why don't you write your memoirs of your service and your combat and everything? And I said, oh, God, I don't think I could do that. And he said, well, think about it. So I thought about it. One day, I said, just for the heck of it, I'm going to see what I can do. So I got the pad out, and I started writing, you know. And it was strange because the more I wrote, the more it came back to me. And I ended up with, I think, 7 pages, after I typed it up, 7 pages, 8.5 by 11, single-space fine print. And it was one of the best things that I enjoyed doing, you know. And but what I was going to say was I saw the little Statue of Liberty many times. But I'll tell you, that lady never looked as grand or as beautiful as it did when we sailed into New York Harbor. Boy, I'll tell you.
I can imagine.
It was really something to see her. Gee, yeah.
If you could have, you probably would have climbed up there and given her a hug and kiss.
Yeah, and then we went to Fort Dix, and I think we were there, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. And then they dispersed us to our different induction centers, you know, to be discharged. And then I went to Camp Devens to be discharged. Yeah.
And when you were discharged at Camp Devens, what did you do right away at the USO building, if I'm not mistaken? That's what you told me.
Yeah, we went to the USO building. I think there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 of us, and we had a few beers to celebrate our homecoming and so on.
You mentioned calling the family, though.
Yeah, oh yeah, well, yeah, and you know, they had a lot of phones, but good Lord, you'd have to stand in line for an hour to get to use a phone, and of course there was no limit on the length of conversation. So, but first thing I called my mom and dad, And then I called Mary, my wife now, my girlfriend, and told them when I was going to be discharged. And so my dad said, we'll drive down, and we'll pick up Mary, and we'll drive down and pick you up. Yeah. So.
How do you feel? How did you feel that when you saw him, when you came home, or actually when they met you?
Oh, it was you know, it was. I hadn't, well, of course, I hadn't seen him in a year and a half, 18 months or longer, and it was just wonderful, you know, to just be able to put your arms around your family and your girlfriend, and to know that you made it safe and sound, and that you don't have to worry about anything else anymore, and get back to civilian life and enjoy life as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it hard to adjust back to civilian life?
Yeah, it wasn't too hard, but you know, it's funny. With me anyway, I don't know about anybody else, but with me it's funny. When I went into the service, when I was in the service, and when I was overseas, it seemed like I'd been in the Army all my life. And that when I got home, after a couple of months or so, it seemed like I'd never been away. And I don't know, I was very fortunate because I just got back into civilian life with no problem at all. You know, I had to go out and buy some new clothes, of course,
yeah,
and stuff like that. But it was great. I was just so overjoyed to be away from the Army and away from combat,
right,
and away from bullets and away from death, and you know, that I just kind of fell into it. Luckily, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Did you go back to work right away?
Not immediately, no. I took a little time off, and at that time you could draw, what they call it, the 5220 Club.
Yeah, that was it. Okay.
I think, wasn't it? Something
Yes.
like that. Yeah, you could draw
$20 for 52
$20 a month for 52
weeks,
or for $20 a week for 52 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I took advantage of that. And then something came up that if you still hadn't had a job, you could do it again. You could collect another 5220.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I did 2 of them, and then I went to work. Yeah. Yeah. Then I went to work, and I started working as a meat cutter in a meat market.
Well, I want to, one thing. Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. When Mary and I were planning on getting married, we had made our marriage plans, and we wanted to buy a house. And we found this house that we loved. So I went to the bank, and at that time, you could get a loan to buy a house. I think it was, what was it, 4% interest or something like that. It was a real good deal anyway. And because we probably wouldn't be able to buy a home without that GI loan. It was called the GI loan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The GI loans, they helped thousands and thousands of
education-wise and everything, you know. Yeah, yeah.
Now
I probably should have taken advantage of education, but I just wanted to get back to work and get on with my life.
You know, I was going to ask you, what did you do for a living? You know, basically the rest of your life.
Well, I was a meat cutter. I was a meat cutter for, I don't know, I guess like 52 years or something like that. You know, and I started in a little store. Well, it wasn't a little store. It was a manufacturing plant, Worley's. They manufactured hot dogs and cold meat and sausage and like that. And they also had a retail store. And so when I went to talk to him, he hired me right away because he said, "Are you a veteran?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good, I'll put you to work," which I thought was, you know, nice.
Sure.
Great. And I worked for him. Then he made me manager of the retail store, and I started working 54 hours a week for $32 a week.
That was your starting pay?
That was my starting pay when I came out of service. Yeah, 54 hours a week. And so Mary and I decided, we set our wedding date, as I said before, So I told him that I was going to get married, and he said, "Oh, good." I said, "Is there any possibility that I could get a little more money?" I said, "You know, I got a wife to support now." He said, "Oh yeah, we'll take care of you, Bill." So he gave me a $3 raise. Made me $35 a week. Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah.
But, you know, in comparison, the pay was lousy. I mean, the pay was little, but the prices were a lot different too.
Right. You didn't need as much.
You didn't need as much
then,
as you do today. Yeah.
And you did that for 52 years.
52 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you did say you got married.
Yeah.
And do you have any children?
Yeah, we have 5 children, all adopted. The first ones we adopted were identical twin girls.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
identical twin girls, yeah. And they're still identical. It's amazing how much they look, yeah, after all these years. Yeah. And then we had, we adopted adopted 2 boys and a girl after that. Yeah.
That's great.
We had 3 girls and 2 boys. Yeah.
Big family.
Yeah, 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 sure is. And
Did
we're proud of all of them.
Well, I think it was a good idea that your son-in-law talked you into that memoir.
Oh, yeah.
I read it, and I think it was great.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, it was. He's, and of course, I mailed him a copy, and my 2 granddaughters a copy, and they wanted them, and so I did. And,
That's good.
Yeah.
Did you keep in touch with any of your buddies or attend any reunions?
No, we never had any reunions, but I kept in touch with one real good, Bill Miller, his name was. He lived in Pennsylvania, and I tried to look up Elmo Pence. He was another platoon sergeant. We were real close buddies. But he lived in Pennsylvania. They said Clearwater, Pennsylvania. He owned a gas station, but I never could find it. Well, Mary and I drove down there. Well, we were on our way to visit Bill Miller, so I said, we'll look up Elmo Pence at the same time. But I never could find him. I never could find him. And we were close because we played volleyball while we were in the Army of Occupation. And we had a championship team in the European theater.
Really?
Yeah, well, I was 6'2", he was 6'4", and we had a couple other tall guys, you know, and we were champs.
The taller the better, and especially,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think back 60, 65 years ago that humans weren't as tall as they are today.
No, I know. You know, it's funny you should say that because, you know, I can remember, you know, I never had to look up at anybody. And today, these kids are taught head over me, you know. It's amazing.
Something they put in our food, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I joined the American Legion, the Lanesboro American Legion. Yeah, yeah. I was going to join the VFW, and I never did. I don't know why. And I probably should have.
Now we have 3 or 4 pictures that we'd like to show, and you can discuss them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Deacon Bill, do you feel that your military service had a positive or negative effect on your life?
I'd say positive, definitely, you know, because it gave me a greater appreciation of life, for one thing, and well, you know, I would say how good God can be. You know, when I stopped to think of the not only with Lieutenant Fleckenstein, but other times when I've had close calls, you know, and how I could go through 18 months over there and come back with, you know, no injuries, no scratches, no nothing, not anything that harmed me. And it gives you a greater appreciation of your family, and it gives you a greater appreciation of just how fortunate you are. And of course, it never hurts for you to learn how to take orders. You know, you have to take orders in life from somebody. When you get a job in civilian life, you have to take orders, and that's one thing that the military teaches you, how to take orders and how to accept criticism and so on. It's definitely, I would say, definitely a positive effect on me. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back about 3 questions. Now, we talked about what you did for your career.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do now? Now, I understand that you do an awful lot now.
Well, of course, I'm an ordained deacon in the Catholic Church, and it keeps me very, very busy. I go to Berkshire Medical Center every Wednesday and visit patients, and I go to they call it Berkshire Place. It's on South Street in Pittsfield. It's a retirement home for elderly women, and I go there to visit them. My wife and I are very involved in prison ministry. I'm at the Berkshire County Jail and House of Correction 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 nights a week. We have a program there called REC, Residents Encounter Christ, and we try to bring Christ into the prisoners' lives, and I spend a lot of time there because I really enjoy that. And of course, I do a lot of other things for the church. And I have shut-ins that I visit during the week. I visit some on Sunday, some during the week. And it keeps me going, keeps me busy for a retired person.
So now you're going about 70 hours a week now.
Oh, probably, yeah. Probably, yeah, yeah.
I understand that we have 3 or 4 photographs that you'd like to talk about.
Okay. Okay.
Is this your boot camp?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's this. Yeah, yeah. That's when I was a buck private. Yeah. And this is somewhere in combat. He was one of my squad leaders, and that's me with the steel helmet on. I don't know where his steel helmet was. He should have had it on, but and you can see the cartridge belt around my waist over to the right. That's a cartridge belt.
Now, is that a 45 on your,
yeah,
on your right?
Yeah, I had when I was in charge at Moosburg, I had a 45, and I also had one when we had taken some town, and everybody had left but our company, and they put me in command of the town, and I carried a 45 then. Usually I carried an M1 rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was Morose, I think that guy's name was. And this is me in my Jeep and driver when I was in charge at Moosburg. And I had a 45 then too. And I also carried a carbine. Yeah. That was, I had it. But I still wore the old steel helmet. Now this is in Camp Landing, Florida. That's my buddy, Captain Julius J. Lucky. And the first sergeant was on leave, and so Captain Lucky asked me if I would be officer of the day. And I said yes, and of course you had to fill out day reports and attendance reports and so on and so forth. And so he said to one of the kids, "Take a picture of me." He said, "I'll make believe I'm bawling Sergeant Moesley out." It don't look like it's bawling me out, but anyway, I had to laugh at him. I don't know what that is.
I think it was this, they told us, was on the back of one of the photographs.
Oh, guaranteed for life?
And apparently,
is that what it says?
Yep. Now, let's see, that's got to be 64 years, 65 years old?
Yeah, 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 at least.
Well, apparently.
Yeah.
The guarantee's still in effect, I hope.
I hope so, too. I hope so, too, for a few more years.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, Deacon Bill, I'd like to thank you very much for giving of your time to tell your story, and thank you very much for your military service.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Good.
And thank you for your military service. I understand you were in the Marines.
Yes.
God bless you. Yeah.